Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Rory Vaughan. I'm the Chair of the Economy, Arts, Sports and Public Realm Policy and Accountability Committee. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping points. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so by taking part you are consenting to be recorded. Secondly, please can officers introduce themselves before speaking for the first time? There are no scheduled fire alarm tests, so if the fire alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting. Please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to my right, I think. Officers will direct you to the assembly point in Riverside Gardens. Before we begin the formalities of the meeting, first of all, I'd like to just welcome Councillor Cowan, Leader of the Council, who's going to join us for some of tonight's meeting. Secondly, I'd just like to pay tribute to former Councillor Charlie Treloggan, who was Mayor of the Borough for, I think, 3 years in the 2000s, who we've heard has sadly passed away yesterday, admittedly at the ripe old age of 99, but will be sadly missed by all of us who knew him for many years. He was clearly a stalwart, very much a Fulham boy, had many tales about his wartime service in the Navy, and, as I say, was the mayor of Hammersmith and Fulham for 2 or 3 years during the 2000s, and was very well respected on both sides of the chamber. So it's with great sadness that we announce his passing this evening. And Councillor Cowan, would you like to add?
Well, thank you for mentioning Charlie. And as I'm here, I wouldn't mind. I just got an email from his son-in-law. But Charlie was not only a fantastic public servant to all of us in Hammersmith and Fulham, he was a fantastic citizen to our country. And being that age, saw action in the Second World War. I know from my own perspective, I always found it quite difficult to reconcile that my friend, who always presented himself on the same level as me, and was a very matter-of-fact person, was also there in those grainy black and white Parfait movies in the Second World War. I'll just read out what his son-in-law has just emailed me. I'm going to write a piece, I think, for the website. But Charlie volunteered for the Royal Navy as soon as he was able, and served with the battleship HMS Rodney, initially in Scapa Flow. The Rodney was sent to the Mediterranean to support Allied landings in North Africa and on convoys to relieve Malta. He subsequently served on the aircraft carrier HMS Victorious, which contributed to the attacks on the German battleship Teplitz, the biggest battleship ever built in Europe. After the Teplitz was eliminated as a threat to the North Atlantic convoys, Victorious was deployed to the Eastern Fleet for action in the Pacific against the Japanese. She was in the Allied flotilla in Tokyo Bay for the signing of the Japanese surrender on board the USS Missouri, and he was also involved with the repatriation of Allied prisoners of war held by the Japanese in Nagasaki and in Hong Kong. The state of the POWs left a profound and upsetting impression on Charlie. After demobilization in 1947, he married Rose Davenport. Oh, I didn't realize that. And from his marriage was the only child, Margaret, who survives him. Rose sadly died in 1974. And there's much more which I'll put into the tribute that we put to him on the website. But those of us who knew Charlie and loved him, he was a very active member of the community. And after he lost his seat in 2006, he worked very hard to save the West Kent and Gibbsbury estates, where he lived, and he was, by every measure of that generation, he presented as just another normal citizen you might meet. But behind that, if you ever asked him, he had some fantastical stories about a very different age. So I know this is the first council meeting we've had since he died on Saturday morning at 12:30 in the morning. And I think it is right that you have quite rightly made recognition of him, Chair, and also we take a minute's silence, as he was one of a kind and he was deeply loved and widely respected across all who knew him. So thank you for that moment of remembrance, Chair.
Thank you. If I think I'll stand up myself, but if you can join us in a moment's silence. Thank you very much. So, thank you. So on to the business for tonight's meeting. So I've received apologies for absence from councillors Sharon Holder, Andrew Jones and Zarar Qayyum. Are there any more apologies for absence?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah.
I should say the reason I'm here is Sharon Holder has lost her voice and Councillor Jones is away, and I've therefore agreed to step in and answer any questions on their behalf, which I can do for Councillor Qayyum as well.
Thank you very much. You're most welcome, Councillor. Declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest to declare at this stage? Item number 3, minutes. Do members agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of April 2024? Those agreed. Okay, thank you. Those are agreed. So on to item 4, update on waste and recycling service developments. I think we've got Mark Graysbeck, Director of Public Realm, and I'm delighted to say Pat Cosgrave, Service Lead for Street Environmental Services. So it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. Pat Cosgrave, Service Lead for Street Environmental Services, and thank you for having me along this evening to present around some of the service developments in the waste and street cleansing contract. There is a presentation, I think, to be shared on the screen. Thanks. You can click on to slide 2, please, Rob. So in terms of managing waste, the single best thing we can do is to minimise the amount of waste we produce. And in terms of performance for waste minimisation, Hammersmith and Fulham perform very well across London and nationally. We produce 227.6 kilograms of household waste per head per year. And that's excellent performance. It makes us the 3rd best in the country in terms of waste minimisation. And again, it's something that we do want to encourage, to reduce the amount of waste we produce. From whatever waste we do produce, the next best thing we can do with it in terms of managing that waste is to recycle as much of it that we collect as we possibly can. And again, so looking at the materials that we produce. Shall I carry on? Okay. Yeah. So thanks for that. In terms of dry mix recycling, which would be the things like that you have, like paper, cardboard, metal tins, cans, etc. We perform quite well in London. We're 9th out of the 32 boroughs in terms of the amount of that we recycle. However, when we factor in food waste and garden waste, when that gets put, because with that being disposed of in a residual waste stream, that then puts us at the bottom quartile of performance in London in terms of our recycling rate. So it's because of this that we've been seeking to introduce changes to the way we collect waste, collecting it in different waste streams, and also recycling as much as we possibly can. I believe at a previous Policy and Accountability Committee, Annie Baker presented the details of a prototype service that we undertook from November 2000 for the collection of waste and recycling wheel bins, and a separate collection of food waste, which ran across 5,000 properties across the borough, into 1 round each day. That was reported to in the PAC, I believe, in November 2022, and the survey results from that survey of the prototype have been replicated within the report. Basically, essentially, we found that people were happy with the service. They found it easy to use. it provided enough capacity for their waste and recycling, and that they were able to recycle more. Sorry, Rob. Next slide, please, Rob. So to talk about the wheeled bins and food waste collection service, following the prototype, we've started rolling out this service and implementing it across the borough from November last year. To talk a little bit about why we've done it, the benefits of the wheel bin and food waste collection service were to increase our recycling rate. It leads to cleaner streets. When you're able to contain waste within containers as opposed to in sacks, and waste being presented in sacks, there's less opportunity for foxes, other pests to tear those sacks open and causing litter spillage across the street. Collecting recycling in wheel bins also enables us to reduce our reliance on single-use plastic bags. Currently, for sack collections, the council provide recycling sacks, as well as being single-use plastics, which we do want to reduce as much as possible. There's also the issue of the costs of those. And for every 1 million sacks that we're able to take out of production for the collection of recycling, we'll save £60,000 per 1 million sacks. The wheel bin and food waste collection service also has improved health outcomes for collection crews. Enabling them to collect in wheel bins, it again contains the waste, so there's less opportunity for sharps or other kind of injuries from glass, etc. But also being able to collect in a wheel bin, which is placed on a hoist on the back of a refuse collection vehicle, means that the constant bending, lifting, turning and throwing of sacks into the back of the refuse collection vehicle, those repetitive strain injuries and those musculoskeletal injuries that can arise from repeatedly doing that is mitigated. Again, by increasing the recycling and moving the amount of waste that we can recycle into those cleaner methods, it's not only more ecologically friendly, but the disposal costs for disposing of recyclate are cheaper than those for our residual waste stream. And again, the bottom line is that the more we can recycle of the waste that we produce, the less that we're sending to be burnt in the incinerator at the energy from waste plant. Next slide, please, Rod. So to talk a little bit about the service rollout, we mentioned the prototype service from November 2000, and we used the learning from that service to the prototype service to try and inform the rollout and the implementation more widely across the borough. We started in November 2023, and the deliveries operated over 5 phases, which essentially mirrored collection days. So if we would change one collection day at a time rather than across the borough the whole time, and introduce those new services in essentially a geographical wave across the borough. Information was sent to all households in October 2023 to let them know the service was coming. But obviously, because of the phased approach, then further communications were sent on collection days in advance of those collections happening. So these would be a letter prior to deliveries. We also informed the ward councils of which streets in their wards would be receiving wheel bins and food waste services in that upcoming phase of delivery. Again, we were really keen, as well as leaflets, to do as much engagement as we possibly could in order to explain the benefits of the services I just have to you, and explain why we're doing something so different, because it's a significant change in the way that waste and recycling has been collected in the borough for many, many years. So we've tried to engage as possible and made offers to engage with residents associations and groups. We organised a number of local drop-in sessions before each of the phased rollouts. So, and across 16 drop-in events, we had over 700 individual residents visit. So that enabled them to discuss with us their concerns about the service, enable us to explain how the service would work, and to talk a little bit about the flexibility that we would be able to offer in terms of how we would deliver the services, whether people would be eligible for to receive the wheel bins, and how it would work, and reassure them about how it would work. So that was very valuable. We were also really keen that on the day we did the deliveries, not everyone will attend a drop-in event, but when deliveries are happening on the street, we wanted to make sure that we had enough resource to be able to engage really, really comprehensively with residents. So each delivery day, as well as the delivery team contractor, we had officers from the council's waste and recycling team, and also collection officers from Veolia, the waste collection contractor, in order that we could discuss with residents the bins we were delivering, and again, engage with people on the street at the time to make sure that we were able to deliver them a service which would be appropriate for them, but would also achieve the outcomes that we wanted to around increasing recycling and minimising waste. As well as that, we've put in additional resources from both Veolia and the council to ensure that we're able to respond like quickly to concerns and any complaints. So, for example, if people weren't when we delivered the bins or weren't able to come to one of the events, we set up a dedicated mailbox, new bins mailbox, where we've had that being staffed throughout the rollout, and with the target time which we've achieved, virtually all cases of responding to any inquiries to the mailbox within 3 working days. As well as that, we've talked about it's a significant way that we're delivering services to our residents. It's also a significant change to the way that our contractor collects the waste, so and the bin men collect the waste. So we've also had additional resource that we've put in, so that in the weeks following the delivery of the wheeled bins and the food waste containers to any street, we've been able to have monitoring officers to go out afterwards and ensure that the collections are taking place as they should and container returns are happening as they should. So again, the speed of the rollout, like I said, we started it in November 2023. We're just coming to the end of the core phase of deliveries now. And again, the speed of the rollout's really been determined by the level of engagement that we needed in each area to ensure that we're able to be as responsive as possible, and also to work within the resources available. In terms of the outcomes, as to where we are as of last week, we now estimate that approximately 47,000 households have the food waste service. That will be individual households. Also, some households with multiple occupancy will be sharing. And 20,000 sets of wheel bins have been delivered of various sizes. Those 20,000 sets will equate to more than 20,000 households, because again, where this house is multiple occupancy, we've been able to be flexible about the size of the bins, so having larger recycling and waste bins for residents who might wish to share. So those 20,000 sets will cover more than 20,000 households. And again, we continue to put resource in place and to continue to engage with residents through the new bins mailbox, or in person, or through any other of the channels where people might contact us, in order to be flexible about the bin sizes. Essentially, we try to be flexible as possible when we've delivered the bin sizes to people. We've asked them to try to use the service and see how they got on with it. And if they found that the bins they had were too large, we're able to be flexible and look to see if we can swap them for a smaller bin, which still works operationally and fits on the lifting mechanism of the vehicle. Additionally, some residents have requested smaller bins. Once they've started using them, especially with the recycling bins, they find that it's probably not enough capacity for what they need. So we're making sure that we continue, after the service has been implemented, to engage with residents and really work with them to try and ensure that we come up with a solution that really works for everybody. I think it's as well as making the different sizes of bins available as well, but we do recognise, especially in like urban environments and in a London environments, there can be limited outside space, and that's why there are a number of, you've seen the difference between the number of properties that have received wheel bins to those who have received food waste containers. Where there hasn't been outside space for bins, we haven't delivered bins to those properties, and they will remain on the SAC collection. We were really keen to make sure that the bins that we delivered could be stored within the curtilage of the property and would not be obstructing the pavement. And we also offered a service to remove old bins from properties in order that they could accommodate the new bins. So I think we've, as of today, we've got some outstanding, but we've collected over 6,000 old bins from properties. And again, in terms of swapping bin sizes, we estimate that there's been just over 3,000 residents have asked to swap to bin sizes, some from larger bins to smaller bins, some from smaller bins to larger bins. That number will change. It will continue to change because we'll continue to work with residents, but that equates to approximately 15 to 17% of the properties that we've delivered wheel bins to that have asked to swap. Again, there may be other people who haven't got round to asking to swap, and they will, which is going to be absolutely fine, and we're going to be able to resource that. But what we hope is that essentially in over 80% of the cases, we feel what that demonstrates is that what we've delivered, people have found that it's suitable for them. And the next slide, please, Rob. So again, just a very quick slide, some of the positive feedback that we received through the new bins mailbox, which is really positive, and it's good that we can feed that back to the team, because we've taken a really measured approach and spent a lot of time engaging with residents. It's been difficult for a lot of the staff, so it's always very nice that we're able to share some positive feedback with staff from the waste and recycling team within the council and also from the contractor. And the next slide, please, Rob. So again, the proof of the pudding's in the eating, and what we've been really, really pleased to see is the significant increase in food waste tonnage that we've been able to collect. And again, this is food waste tonnage that we're able to to treat in a more ecologically sound way, but also it's not going for incineration. It's we're diverting it into a much cleaner and better value for the council waste stream. So as of May, from what we were collecting during the prototype to what we're collecting at the end of May, and that will have increased again this month, or this month just gone. We've increased the amount of food waste that we've collected since we've put from the prototype to the rollout by 120 tonnes per month, which we're extremely pleased about, obviously. And as well as that, sorry, next slide, please, Rob. We've also seen the change in our household recycling rate. So as well as food waste, by delivering wheeled bins, and it does have impact on people's behaviour and how they recycle. So by having the green wheeled bin there, that people do, we find, generally take more time sorting their recycling. Hopefully we find less contamination, i.e. non-recycling materials going into recycling bins. And we estimate it does fluctuate month by month, but in terms of since we've been rolling out the service across the borough, we've seen anywhere between 50 and 150 tonnes of additional dry mixed recycling following the wheel bin service. So again, we were collecting dry mixed recycling previously, but we are collecting more of it now. So we're collecting more food waste, we're collecting more DMR, and dry mixed recycling. And again, so this is the positive news, and this is the reason that we're doing what we're doing. We want to change these services because we want to be the greenest council. Next slide, please, Rob. Sorry, just before the next slide, I do apologise. Again, just to give a little bit more background of what we're doing around food waste collections and dry mix recycling collections. So now we've done the majority of the deliveries to the number of households who will get wheel bins. As the services bed in, we'll be revisiting each area, checking how people are getting on, levels of participation, so where people are making sure people are using the food waste service, and working with residents to tackle any issues around contamination of recycling, and to make sure that the significant improvements that we've seen in the recycling rate can be maintained. The services that we've delivered have mainly concentrated on curbside properties. So we're working with colleagues in housing and across housing associations. So later into 2024, what we want to do is develop a food waste collection service for communal properties. Again, the bins that have been received for residential properties would be a small indoor food waste caddy and a 23-litre outside food waste caddy. Some of you will have seen them around the borough. For communal properties with different presentation points, we'll need to look at a separate way of storing the food waste for collection outside the property. So we'll be working with housing colleagues and other colleagues to develop those proposals and hopefully be able to start rolling it out from this autumn. Another significant challenge in collecting food waste in terms of presentation point is flats above shops where there's no outside space at all for, certainly not for wheel bins, but not even for food waste caddies. So we're looking at trialling, we're working with London, and we've started a trial on Askew Road to see if there is any way in which we can have fixed food waste collection point containers for flats above shops. And again, we will be reviewing that in the next few months. People are using the service. It's not getting a huge amount of tonnage at the moment, but the reason we're trialing these things is to try and find what solution we're going to get that's going to be convenient for our residents, but also enable us to increase that food waste tonnage. And we want to roll out food waste services to our businesses and also to schools. So we've already started engaging with schools, with 16 schools that we do collect food waste from for the food waste arises from their kitchens, and we do want to offer a commercial service to our commercial customers to collect their food waste and to dispose of it as a separate waste stream. So going back to the start of the presentation and how our dry mixed recycling performance was impacted on by food waste and by garden waste being collected in the residual waste stream, I've outlined the steps that we've already undertaken to tackle the food waste problem. The food waste issue. So the next service that we are introducing is garden waste recycling service. So this is a new service and it's going to be starting very, very soon, starting in the next few days in terms of being able to start taking subscriptions. Again, this will enable us to, where currently garden waste is presented and collected along with the residual waste stream and taken for incineration, this will enable us to we'll collect it separately on separate vehicles, take it to a different treatment facility and be able to compost it. So we'll be able to achieve some savings in terms of disposal, not as significant as we'd like, but we will look to make sure that we can negotiate as best possible disposal, like pathways as we can, to improve that as we go. So that new service will be launching in the next few days. In terms of the collection methodology, we'll be providing two large reusable sacks per subscription. You know, I think we really do listen to residents, and again, when we've delivered wheel bins, we've tried to make sure that we're being as unobtrusive as possible in terms of the outside space that we know people have. So we've decided, instead of collecting in wheel bins like the majority of other boroughs do, we'll be collecting in reusable Hessian sacks, essentially. So these will fold down in between collection. People will be able to store them in their sheds, etc. So garden waste will be taken to a composting facility as opposed to energy from waste plant. But one of the things we really want to encourage people to do is to consider home composting. Essentially, that's an even group. That is the preferable option because it mitigates against any environmental impacts of having to collect the waste and take it for disposal. It will increase our recycling rate. We're fairly sure of that. When you do waste analysis of what's produced, we know that by removing garden waste from our residual waste stream, that will increase the recycling rate, and also we'll be able to produce more compost. It's going to be a chargeable service. That's in common with all other London boroughs who offer the services. We've benchmarked with other London boroughs. We've looked at what they do and what they charge. We think our charges are comparable in terms of the annual subscription, which will be £90 a year. It's at the higher end, perhaps, for annual subscription, but we think it provides excellent value because with the majority of other London authorities, they collect the garden waste fortnightly. We're going to be offering a weekly collection service. So it equates to a smaller amount per collection. The weekly service will run all year round, apart from a 3-week break at Christmas. So for your £90 subscription, you'll be getting up to 49 collections per year. As well as that, we'll try to encourage people to compost at home, either by creating a compost heap. We do also offer some discounts on home composting units, which are available via our website. And also, residents do have the option to take to the household waste and recycling centre themselves if they don't want to pay a subscription fee. So there are free of charge alternatives. Next slide, please, Rob. So again, talking slightly less about the services we're delivering, but also to try and talk about our direction of travel to how we deliver the services operationally, and our ambitions to be as green as we possibly can. We've been working with our contractor to maximise the amount of electric vehicles we can use to deliver our services within the current charging capacity that we have at Bagley's Lane Depot. So at the moment, the electric vehicles we have on the service number 20 in total. So they're generally smaller vehicles. So there's the supervisor vans, which are they're entirely electric. We've recently got, and as the image shows, some street cleansing bikes. So these will be used by charge hands to enable them to get around the borough in the net carbon zero way. As you'll see, they're quite useful as well for getting to some of those parts of the borough that are probably more difficult to access by vehicle. So, we're hopeful that they'll really have an impact in the summertime, especially on places like the River Walk, in terms of being able to get our charge hands there to maintain the cleanliness. We have 4 of our smaller street cleansing cage vehicles. So these are the cage tipper vehicles that you'll see. So these are the smaller ones of those 3.5 tonners. So we have 4 of those on the contract. And for the garden waste service, we've got an 18-tonne electric refuse collection vehicle. In terms of trying to maximise the amount of electric vehicles we're going to use to deliver our services, there is a lot of work to do that. You can see we've concentrated on some of the smaller fleet there, because essentially they can be charged off a smaller charge output, so 11 kilowatt chargers, whereas a refuse collection vehicle, because of the size of the vehicle, what the vehicle actually has to do in terms of the compaction mechanisms, that needs a lot more power input. So the chargers that you'll need for them will generally be 75 to 100 kilowatts. Essentially, what we don't have at the moment at our depot is the electric capacity in order to power that number of vehicles. So we've been working since our new contract has come into place to look at all our waste collection vehicles, and we're working to come up with a concept design and scoping requirements to see how we could achieve an entirely green fleet, what that would look like, what that would cost. So there will be having to build an additional substation to maximise the amount of electricity we can draw down to power the vehicles. There'll be the hardware works that have to go in, the civil engineering works. So we're hopeful that within the next month or two, we should be able to start presenting that for consideration. The next slide, please, Rob. And I'm coming to the end of the presentation, you'll be glad to know. So, but again, as you'll be aware, our new waste recycling and street cleansing contract commenced in January 2023. And one of the significant elements of this being a new contract that wasn't our previous contract was the social value outcomes that the council now asks for from all its large contractors. So I just wanted to take a couple of quick moments to talk a little bit about the social value. This is additionality, I think, that we've been able to provide via this contract, which is even outside of the service delivery. So in terms of outcomes in the first 16 months of the contract, 25 local people, full-time equivalents have been hired. 2 former armed forces veterans have been hired full-time. 2 former homeless persons hired. 1 person not in employment, education and training, and 1 ex-offender has been hired. I mean, I think it's been really important, and these in terms of how we measure social value, so much of it does talk about local employment and employment for people who have been harder to place in the workforce. We've been really pleased about the work that's been done around that. In addition, in terms of inclusive economy, we've provided 82 hours of career support in prisons, in Wormwood Scrubs prison, but also we're looking at doing that in other prisons across London, because not everyone who is from the local area will be in Wormwood Scrubs. A lot of them will be in different prisons. So we want to make sure that we're engaging with them and providing that career support, and hopefully providing some pathways into employment for when they do get released to assist with their rehabilitation. There's 2 apprentices been hired on the contract. There's been 294 hours of career support that's been delivered in local educational settings, and 11 weeks of meaningful work experience placements. That should double, hopefully, in the next month, because that was last summer. So the work experience placements will be occurring this summer. And in terms of what we've called kind of happy at H&F, so just some additionality of what's been delivered there. There's been 63 hours of school assemblies. Oh, sorry, next slide, Rob. Thank you. Yeah, there's got all the way to the end without forgetting. There's quality, diversity and inclusion training has been delivered to all staff on the contract. We have trained mental health first aiders on the contract in order that they're able to support staff throughout. £15,000 has been donated to local community projects via Veolia's Sustainability Fund, and that's an annual commitment. So there will be a commitment every year that money will be made available for small local projects to bid to in order to support their sustainability outcomes. £2,500 of compost has been provided for community gardens projects, and staff on the Veolia contract have so far provided 121 staff volunteering hours for H&F projects, which include staff volunteering hours to assist with the setup and de-rigging of the community day this weekend. Again, I think with social value, the outcomes and the longer the contract goes on, I think will become more significant. In the first year of the contract, a lot of the groundwork is done to form those partnerships that enable us to have these outcomes. And then as those partnerships are formed and developed through the length of the contract, we hope to see that these outcomes will increase and improve. So just to sort of mention some of the partnerships that have been formed and that we're really thankful for was employment support agencies, including H&F Works, Shaw Trust and Job Centre Plus, homeless charities such as St Mungo's, Her Majesty's Prison Wandsworth, and prison charities including Fairer Chance, Stand Out, Bounce Back, Resurgo, who are a local youth employment partner, Hammersmith Community Gardens Association, and obviously the schools and education providers throughout the borough. So we've been really pleased that the proxy value of social value that we're able to achieve has been significant, and this is something that will be a significant outcome for the remainder of the contract. So that's the end of the presentation. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. It's very comprehensive. I'm sure that's whetted people's appetites for any questions. But Councillor Cowan, first of all, did you want to add anything to that at the moment? Okay. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. Just going to say a couple of quick reflections and a couple of questions, if that's all right. Because waste is every resident's experience. And you're just saying that 47,000 food waste services are now being provided. That's extraordinary. And I would just like to say to the meeting that in my dealings as a councillor with the team, they've been very responsive. It's not perfect because it's change. And some people get very precious about their bins. I can understand that, I do. But they've been very responsive and involved. And also, Chair, one of the things I did, because I'm quite interested in, I think, what's called lived experience data. So I actually took it upon myself after the last meeting to contact the team, and I was trained by Veolia, and it was very thorough training actually, and I'm quite surprised I passed it. But anyway, I did, and I got a high vis jacket. But one of the things I want to say about that is that I was very impressed with the way that they were thinking first and foremost about the health and well-being of the staff. So I think that's very important in these matters, and I know you mentioned that. Of course, it's about collection of waste and so on. But I was quite surprised actually how thorough it was. And then as a result of that, I went out with the team in Brook Green one morning very early with the supervisor, and we met residents as we were going around. And it was a very positive way of responding to them. And again, the team didn't know I was going to be there, and the supervisor kind of did, but he was excellent. And it gave me an insight actually, and it enabled me to answer questions at various surgeries we've had and since. So the questions I do want to ask though are, first of all, with the garden waste, that's coming soon, as you said, to charge. Have you publicised that as much as you think you could do? Because you may get a reaction from people because that's new. And I know you just said you've benchmarked it against other boroughs, but I think you will get some questions about that. That's the first question, if I can ask that one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Mark Racebeck, Director of Public Realm. It's fair to say that Pat said that the service is about to come online, and we're doing a soft launch, so it will be announced just initially on the council's website, but that will be followed by a significant media campaign, and with information leaflets going to all households in the borough. In response to that, he will recognise that we do need to work hard to publicise it. August, with people being away, so we're running that as a soft launch, but with the intention of really getting going in bigger by September when most residents are back. So there'll be a period of publicity over the next month.
The other question is, has the rollout been completed now in the Hammersmith and Fulham?
So essentially what I would call the core deliveries of the rollout have been completed. So in terms of the curbside residential streets that we wanted to deliver to, there are certain streets that we are going back, which we are going to complete. So some of those would be some of the main roads, which do have a lot of residential properties, so like Fulham Palace Road, Dawes Road, etc., where we think there'll be relatively low eligibility for wheel bins, but we still hope that people will be able to have food waste contained within the curtilage of their property. So we'll be tackling those roads. And again, essentially, as we've said, we've been offering a lot of opportunities for people to swap bins. As we've gone further, I think those people who've had the bins now for several months, they've probably settled down into it. But as we've only just been finishing and still working over the next few days to finish the core delivery rollout, we know that after a few weeks or months, people will start, having ideas about their service, whether they've got the right capacity bins. So we will still be operating a service whereby we'll be able to maintain that flexibility in the service offer.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Borland, did you want to come in?
Thank you very much for that. I've just got a couple of questions. One around the food waste bins. 47,000 is a fantastic number. But I wondered what percentage are actually being used. This is purely anecdotal, but I see everywhere, every street, I see them with their little blue tape on them, unfortunately not being used. So what kind of, it's 120 tonnes per month, so we've got up to, what kind of percentage is that of the potential 47,000?
Thank you. I think, yeah, anecdotally, certainly the same, Councillor Borland, when I walk around, I do see that some people aren't participating in the food waste service. So what we've talked about is the properties that we've delivered the bins to and made the service available to. So again, some of the work that we're doing now that the key core delivery phase has been rolled out is to actually go back to all those streets we've delivered to again, like you say, identify the properties where food waste isn't, we have delivered food waste containers to and they're not being used. So we'll be able to do that by, as you say, by visually seeing, but also by using the better management information systems we've got within our contract, when we're going to be able to get crews to tell us that the food waste isn't being presented. And then what we want to do is understand why people won't want to use it. Some people don't like the idea of food waste because it smells. It's an unfortunate fact of food waste that, like, you know, even if we're collecting it weekly, there will be an element of that. Some people won't produce a lot of food waste, people who home compost, or, you know, people who do really minimise their waste. And that's also great. But what we want to make sure is that we go around and identify those properties that aren't participating. I try and identify what their barriers to participation are, and then work with them to see if we can help overcome those barriers. I think there will always be an element of people who don't engage with any particular service, which is a shame, but what we want to do is make sure we give people the opportunity as far as possible. And like you say, hopefully, once we've been able to do a little bit more of that work, and we'll be able to see whether that does have an impact on food waste. In a bizarre way, in some ways, food waste, generally the experience in other boroughs is that food waste performance in terms of tonnes collected will probably plateau and drop off a little bit, because one of the other things it does do is drive behaviour change. People see how much they're wasting and they might change their purchasing and food behaviours. So it will be difficult in some ways to draw a comparison that each person we engage with, we will get X amount of kilograms of food waste from them. But what we want to do is engage and make sure that we can identify those barriers to participation and remove them where possible. But I'm sure we'd be happy to report further down the line to the Policy and Accountability Committee about the work that we've done subsequently after the rollout.
Thank you. Yeah, I think actually it's a very good point that we're all guilty of buying things that we don't end up using, or so hopefully it will bring it to the forefront of people's minds. I also just wanted to ask about it sounds to me like a logistical nightmare. So you've got one street and we've got one rubbish collection for wheelie bins, and then they've also got to try and find out where the missing gaps are that don't have wheelie bins, and then recycling, is that set with recycling sacks separate as well? So how many, is it all going to still be done on the same days with 3 or 4 vans going? It feels like.
Yes, it is. And I understand it does seem counterintuitive that one thing we did find, and in terms of going back to the tonnages, even before we moved to the prototype service, we did find that we were starting to see an increase in our recycling rate because of moving to single back collections. And I know it is counterintuitive because it seems like more vehicles, but what it does actually do is minimise miles travelled, because previously we used to collect in split back vehicles, so it'd be 70% refuse, 30% recycling. Once that 30% recycling was filled up, that vehicle would then need to go to tip. And our tip is in Wandsworth. So driving down and back to the tip and then coming to complete the round did have a significant impact. Whereas by configuring the rounds in terms of single back collections, it means that each collection vehicle, when we configure the rounds so that each collection vehicle will only have to go to the tip once. So it does reduce vehicle miles, even though I do understand the point you make that does seem counterintuitive in terms of the vehicle passes through any particular street.
But how would the operatives know? Are they just having to, I just don't understand how they're going to be able to pick out the ones that don't have the bins.
So essentially, you know, the presentation point of the bins is within the property boundary. But again, one of the things about having relatively small frontages, and a lot of the properties is quite obvious, the ones that do have wheel bins. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did in this new waste and recycling contract, which we didn't have in our previous one, was to embrace technology as much as possible. So we've been working on the implementation. Again, it's still a full integration of it. It does need to be finished. But what this contract does have is a management information system. So the crews have now started using in-cab technology. So there will be essentially a tablet which the driver has, which is mounted within the vehicle, which essentially says what the collection is for each property along that street. So that hopefully, and then that should hopefully help us to identify. So if there are issues around presentation of waste or contamination of waste, we also want to capture that on the in-cab devices in order to then, that will help us to target our interventions to sort of improve waste behaviours. So again, it won't be perfect. Anything that does rely on humans is never going to be perfect, unfortunately. But we do think that we're taking advantage of technological advances in order to help minimise any miscollections.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Collins.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Yeah, just a couple of questions. They're more practical, really. About, for example, the waste, the food waste. If you have something that's in a packaging and it's gone off, are you supposed to open the packaging, scrape it out, and then put them in different places? Yeah.
Yeah, so the food waste is organic waste, which is taken for a treatment. It cannot be invested in composting, but it's anaerobic digestion. But so we don't want sort of plastics or packaging. We would like them to be recycled in the green waste bin, if you do have a green waste bin, or in your clear sacks if you don't have a waste bin, and that will go for the treatment with the rest of the dry mix recycling.
Okay, and thanks. And the other thing is the trees and plants and things, if they fall into your garden, leaves, and you put them in your regular bin, what's going to happen if it's, you know, is there a certain point where you say, okay, because some people might only have like one bag in a year. That's the other side of it, because like a lot of the time the tree stuff falls into your garden from somewhere else. And what are you supposed to do then? I mean, you can't always chuck it back over the wall. It might just be a very small amount.
No, I mean, we can't, it's difficult to anticipate every individual circumstance for every resident in the borough, but, you know, the service which we're introducing, the new service that we're introducing, is designed to provide choice again. That's been the approach through all of the changes we've done. So, so clearly, if you've got a garden, you may be able to self-compost. If you are an occasional producer of green waste, as I tend to be, then you may choose to drive to the tip, which is, you know, free to dispose of, rather than take part in paying for a service, or you can pay the service. What we are looking to do, and I recognise it won't be perfect, and some people will continue to do it, but what we are trying to do by offering this choice is to discourage people from putting their waste, their garden waste, into their general waste. Because we don't want to send that for incineration. It's not good for the environment. Secondly, it costs us more money than it needs to, and we want to maximise recycling. So hopefully we're making it as flexible as we can be. But you're right, it's not perfect, and you know, inevitably we're going to get some contamination where some green waste will go into general waste. But what I would say is, if it is becoming, you know, rather than the odd leaf, but something more like bags, then we would obviously be having, you know, interactions with residents to discourage them to do that and explain that they need to join the one of the other options in the subscription service. Okay.
Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I think the contractor Viola is doing a first-class job. They seem to have improved things tremendously. Just two matters. Firstly, is it possible to get these wheeled bins from the garden be collected from the garden, as opposed to leaving them on the pavement? The reason for that is follows. Firstly, in my surgery, I've had several disabled residents who complained that they have difficulty in moving these things to the front door because, you know, they can be quite heavy. Secondly, it blights the landscape. For instance, in the area I live, the collection takes place on Friday mornings. So when I come home on Thursday evening, there's an array of green and black bins together with the small silver ones on top of the green and the black bins. And it really would be quite nice if they weren't there. And thirdly, and I've mentioned this previous times, and I've seen there has been a marked improvement in this, especially now that we're actually approaching the holiday season. There's a security angle as well. Leaving these bins outside is a red flag to any thief who's wandering around saying, oh, well, these people are abroad, or they're out and they're not at home, so I think I'll go and help myself. So for those three reasons, I'm just wondering, is it possible? And I know it probably involves more time, more money for Viola, if they simply collect the bins from the front of the garden and put them back. I know they're putting them back at my house, either because someone's told them that I'm a councillor or not, but it has a marked improvement since the last time I spoke. But it would be nice for every resident, especially the disabled residents, to have that advantage too. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. I'm glad you're getting a good service. And again, it's a service that we want to be the standard. We are trying to set ourselves really high standards in how we deliver this service because it impacts on so many people. So we do want to make sure we get it right. In terms of the collection point for wheel bins, we have only delivered wheel bins to where there has been sufficient outside space within the boundary of the property for them to be stored. So the wheel bins should be presented within the boundary of the property, and the instruction is for the crews to return them to within the boundary of the property. I think people, again, because they think perhaps they're being helpful, they think, oh, we'll put them out on the pavement. I know in my local borough, Brent, the presentation point for a lot of streets is on the pavement. We're really keen to avoid that. So one of the things we're going to be doing when we're going around reviewing the work is that when we find that people are presenting on the pavement, it's an education thing in a way that we're going to be saying, thank you very much for trying to help, but you really don't need to do that. We will collect from within the boundary of your property. Essentially, in terms of to manage the collections as efficiently as possible, we do ask that people place the bins within the boundary of their property, but as accessible as possible. But we do also understand, Councillor Patel, that some people will have difficulties in manoeuvring the bins for whatever reasons. We do offer an assisted collection service, and people are able to apply for that through the council's website. And I'm happy if you have a surgery to make sure that you've got the details of that, so people can come and explain that they need an assisted collection, and we can make that arrangement. And then that will be recorded on the management information system, which I described to Councillor Borland earlier. And with an assisted collection, the advantage of it is that the collection point will be specified on the crew's in-cab device, but also there will be a setting on that in-cab device that that particular property has to be signed off as collected as an individual property if it's been marked as an assisted collection. So we're happy to offer that service. And yeah, again, the security angle, I agree with exactly what you say, and that's why we're asking the presentation point to be within the boundary of the property. But also, we really need to make sure that the crews are returning it to within the boundary of the property. And that is more simple when the presentation point and the return point is the same. But we'll definitely be working with the refuse collection supervisory team to make sure that the returns are happening properly, no matter where the bins are presented. And we will be doing that education piece of work in terms of where people need to present their bins. So hopefully that should mitigate some of the issues that you've described.
Mr. Patel, did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to your next report to see what improvements there are. Just a quick point about the green waste. £90 per annum doesn't seem a lot of money, but it could be a lot of money for someone who's unemployed, who's on income support. Is there any exceptions to it? Has it been means tested, or is it just a universal charge being made to everyone? I know you're going to say it's very good value for money for 49 collections a year. In my case, for instance, I think our green collection comes to about 3 or 4 times a year, usually when we cut the hedge or do something to the garden. So although it's nice to have the luxury of collection of 49 times a year, you'll find that not many constituents will take that advantage.
Thank you, Councillor. At the moment, we are not proposing to make any exceptions. As I say, there are options to avoid having to pay, either through self-composting or through taking it for disposal through some other route rather than the waste. But it is a new service, and so we're going to be monitoring and assessing this very carefully. And so, if there are circumstances you are aware of, then we will want to look at those very closely and decide if we need to make any changes to make the service more accessible going forward.
Councillor Collins, sorry, you want to come back?
Thanks. Just wanted to follow up on the bins being outside of the boundary of the house. Somebody nearby has died months ago, and every week their bins are moved out by the bin men. There's nothing in them, and then they leave them there. So I put them back, and so it's not always about people presenting them. They need to be a little bit of local knowledge, maybe, and just
I'm very sorry to hear about that, Councillor Collins, and if you're able to let me know the address, I can make sure I will address that with them. Essentially, again, it is a new service for the crews as well, and we want to make sure that we're engendering those good behaviours about like presentation and return. So it's unfortunate the incident you described that appeared to be the loader has pulled out and then the loader or another loader hasn't replaced them. But again, we want to make sure through robust monitoring that we're preventing that from happening. So I'm really sorry to hear that it has happened, but if you provide me the address, I'll make sure I address that with the waste collection supervisor.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm going to invite some residents to come up in a second. I've just got a couple of small questions though. In terms of going to the garden waste again, in terms of the way it works, presumably it's being collected on the same date as other waste. Is that right? Okay, yes. And the idea with these reusable sacks is you get two. If you subscribe to the service, you'd get two of these sacks, and they would be sort of tipped out into the back of the van in the same way other waste would be, and you get these reusable sacks back, presumably.
That's correct.
Okay, and presumably the benefit of this, amongst other things, is going to be that that tonnage of waste goes into recycling rather than into general waste.
That's correct. There's a couple of benefits. One of it rather than going into general waste, which would mean that it gets charged as general waste, which costs the council significantly more than recycling. But it would also then go for incineration rather than by diverting it away from general waste into being collected separately. We can then reutilize that and recycle it as composting material.
Thanks.
Sorry, just a very minor point about the collection methodology. Rather than they won't tip these sacks directly into the back of the dust cart. Again, we've talked a little bit about the health and safety aspects. So what will we use as a transfer bin, and they will empty the garden waste sacks into the transfer bin, and then that bin will be lifted onto the back of the vehicle, just so they won't be directly lifting over the ray plate at the back of the vehicle.
Just in terms of opportunities to swap bins, I know obviously you're sort of saying that people have settled down, but if people do wish to swap bins at some point, is it a question of contacting the new bins email address, for example, and sort of how well has that been? Well, how well can that be advertised, I guess?
Yes, is the answer. It's a question of contacting the new bins email address, and many people have done. Through the rollout, we've said to people that if they've got any issues, anything which they are got concerns about in relation to what's being delivered, then they should contact us through the bins email address. And several thousand have done, as Pat has explained. We've had sort of 3,000 changes, both in terms of people requesting smaller bins, people requesting larger bins. There are instances where you've got communal properties where they've decided to share bins. So the whole sort of myriad of issues, which is why it's difficult to anticipate when you're doing a rollout exactly what that is without that sort of engagement. So we've discovered that the most efficient way to handle it is to deal with how we have done, which is to assess each property as best we can, and then explain to people to contact us once they've experienced it if there's any issues. And as Pat said, some people contact us straight away because there's an obvious problem with what their requirements are, but typically it comes after a few weeks because people discover that their waste, particularly when they're starting to recycle food waste and they sort of take that away from their standard general waste bin, they might discover they can get away with a smaller bin, or they might discover that actually they need a larger bin. And with the amount of recycling people are doing, it's not uncommon that they want an even larger recycling bin. So people have to sort of assess, and we found through experience that asking people what size bin they want is not necessarily a very good indication of what they actually really need, which is why an assessment and working through experience is usually being a much more successful route.
Thank you very much. They've been waiting very patiently, but can I ask Rosemary Mortimer and Richard Owen to come forward to ask the questions that you had for the officers? Oh, I'm assuming you thought you know what your questions are. But I mean, you can obviously ask the questions you want to ask.
Have you got copies of the question in?
If you want to, yeah, if you want to read out your question, yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, I live in Brackenbury. Residents in Brackenbury were concerned about the effect of tall, bulky wheelie bins in streets where the houses had shallow front gardens. For our phase of the rollout, the council obtained a supply of smaller 93 centimetre, 120 litre bins, and these were deployed in several streets as the default, where people hadn't specified a bin size they wanted. They were given these smaller bins, although not in other streets with similar sized gardens and households. There was quite a widespread feeling these smaller 93 centimetre bins offered a good balance between, they yielded all the benefits which Pat's described today in terms of recycling and cutting down bags and increasing safety for the staff. I'm just going to get a drink of water. Sorry. So these smaller bins offered they yielded all the advantages for the council, but they avoided some of the blighting issues that people were concerned about with, you know, the taller, bigger bins. That these seemed to strike a good balance. And so a question that kept coming up was how would people know about these smaller bins? There seemed to be almost no effort made to publicise their existence. We got 2 very big glossy flyers from the council. We got a letter. They were never mentioned. There were no images of them. Residents were given bins. You know, Veolia assessed properties. They were given a set of bins, but they weren't told about the alternative sizes. And so we keep wondering how people are supposed to ask for this smaller bin if they don't know it exists. And so the question I've got is, and I think that this council's actually made, in some ways, a better job of the bin rollout than others. I think by making the effort to find these smaller bins, you've done something which hasn't been done in other boroughs. I was up in Camden the other day. Even in the most beautiful part of Hampstead, they've got the big bins. So, you went out of your way to make this effort, and several streets in Brackenbury, I think, really appreciate the result of that. But it was limited, and I just wonder whether an opportunity was missed to deploy these bins more maximally and to really tell people about them, because it's been a pretty popular option where people know. That's it, really.
Yeah. Do you know how many streets there might be that want these smaller bins? Because I think we've obviously discussed swapping bin sizes.
I mean, well, for example, my street, almost the same size houses and front gardens as streets who were given these bins. Rainham Road's another example, Southerton Road, Kilmarsh Road. They're all sort of 3 and 4 bedroom houses with very shallow front gardens. And if Bradmore Park Road and Carthew Road can manage with these small bins, and I think they can generally. And the Fulham is full of streets, 3 bedroom houses with small front gardens, that these bins would have suited really well.
Thank you, Mr. Ricebeck.
Thank you very much for the question. As explained, we went out to assess each property, which we've discovered was the most practical way forward. But we're also conscious that typically a standardised bin in the larger bins would not always be suitable for every property. So we're very pleased to sort of come up with a smaller bin and find one that would actually fit onto the hoist of a vehicle, which we weren't expecting. So that was an extra bonus. So we're very pleased that we've been able to provide that as an option. But in terms of the size of bins that is suitable, it really comes down to the needs of the property and how much waste is generated as to what size is suitable. And the reality is that the small bins are not suitable for the vast majority of properties, given the amount of waste that we know that they produce. Which is why the approach is taken to assess the property and to deliver the bins which we consider to be suitable, and to ask people to contact us if they felt differently, which is what we've done. And as I say, that's been very effective, and a number of people have contacted us. But as Pat has also sort of explained, with the logistics of this rollout are quite complex, but they haven't stopped, and we're going to be continuing to assess and reassess the service. And with the information we're going to be starting to collect through the technology, we will start to gain more information in terms of the amount of waste each household is presenting. So as we go forward, we'll be able to see those households who have got too small a bin, and we'll be talking about getting a larger bin so that they don't have to perhaps use sacks in addition to what they're doing. But we'll also be able to see those properties who are producing low amounts of waste and talk to them about whether they're happy with their bins as well. So these are it's a continuing process. And we've also clearly got situations where households are changing and people are moving in and moving out. So there's a constant need for us to continue to monitor and look at the amount of waste collected. But just to repeat the point, the size of bin is really linked to the amount of waste that's generated and whether that's suitable. I'm very pleased that, a number of the properties within the Brackenbury area have been able to provide the smaller bin, and that's been suitable. We've actually had some people that have had to sort of change away from the smaller bin, but overall, I think it seems to have settled down well, and we haven't seen too many issues, and we hope that continues. But I think people need to make an effort to be able to sort of to contain their waste within the bin size. So so it is an ongoing process, and the evidence that we get and the amount of waste that we're collecting, however, does suggest that the vast amount of residents have got the right size bin.
Thanks very much. Did you want to make any further comments on that? I mean, I think the point there is obviously, and as we discussed earlier in the meeting, people can contact the new bin's email address, presumably if they do think that there's an issue about the size of their bin. But it sounds as though there's a question of seeing how things go as people go along, because clearly people are producing the amount of waste that they produce, and the bin size would hopefully,
No, it's fantastic.
reflect that.
It's fantastic that people can change and you're accommodating that, but you've got to have the information about, you've got to know that there's a smaller bin. I mean, some people might just ring up and say, I demand a smaller bin, but you've got to know that there's a smaller bin to request it. And I didn't see that information being given out. People might think their bin is too big, but unless you know there's a smaller one, you're probably just going to, put up with it.
It is the case that in this first phase of this phase of the rollout, we have not openly advertised that. We wanted to rely upon the assessment we've made, and by talking to residents, and a number of residents have communicated, as they have done in Brackenbury, that they'd like to try the smaller bin, and we've accommodated that. But it's been very important that professionally we've been able to make an assessment based upon the type of property, the size of property, the front garden space, etc., as to what we think would be appropriate based upon the how much waste we know is typically generated. It will be logistically extremely difficult to engage and to swap if we asked residents what size of bin they wanted, our experience from some of the trial areas is invariably they're not correct either. Once they, to be able to say you're going to get this size bin, they don't really understand how much waste that accommodates. So our experience is that would not have resolved the problem, and it would have caused us logistically major problems. So we think we've taken the right approach. The evidence suggests that we've got a lot of engagement, and we've got a lot of people contacting us where things aren't right. We've been able to work with them and to keep people happy, and the way we've done that. And as I've said, we will continue to engage and monitor. And if we find areas where we could introduce different bin sizes, we will continue to do that. So it's a constant engagement and trying to fine tune it. But as everybody will know, even our own waste needs might change from time to time. So, so it's not going to be a case of providing a bin and that's it forever. We're going to need to continue to respond to residents' needs as this service and their individual needs develop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reisbeck. Ms. Mortimer, over to you.
Yes, my question was on green waste, which I felt hadn't been really looked at in the round. Because it hadn't been taken into account the contribution which residents who have gardens make to the greening of the borough overall. It was perhaps not the concern of this particular team to consider that, but I felt that it should have been considered, and that the £90, you may well say it's not very much, but it's not inconsiderable, given that previously one was able to put one's green waste in a black bin and have it taken away without any extra charge. So the council's proposing to, as it were, engage with residents by way of a £90 to take away their rubbish. My question really was that those residents who maintain gardens, and most of them are very small, mine is also very small, do so in their own time and at their own expense. In other words, there's no charge to the borough for the greening which residents do, which is particularly important, I would say, for front gardens, which are open to everybody to experience. Their efforts not only encourage birds, bees, and beneficial insects, but also support mental and physical health. Planted front gardens are beneficial to neighbours and passers-by and enhance the look of the street. Gardens reduce potential flooding, and that's been particularly noteworthy this week. We've heard about the mayor proposing that those who concrete their gardens get a fine. Gardens reduce potential flooding and mitigate the heat island effect of hard surfaces, which are very apparent in a large city such as ours. Given all the above and the council's efforts to green the borough, why is it now planning to charge residents for a service which up to now has been free of charge? What plans does it have, if any, to encourage residents to plant their gardens, not only for their own benefit, but for the common good? And does it acknowledge that many of the council's services are used by only a minority of residents, such as this one, perhaps, although the general rule is that all pay for them, whether they use them or not? That's the amount of questions.
Mr. Raisbeck, do you want to take that one?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. This is a brand new service, and I think it's important to recognise that the service isn't free to the council in terms of putting green waste into general waste. That is something which we pay considerable amount of money for in order to dispose of that as general waste, and also the incineration obviously results in environmental impact which is much greater than if we were to treat that in the right way. So this is about encouraging how do we get residents to be encouraged to treat green waste in the right way, and for us to be able to support that. What we hope is that this is going to encourage a lot more people to think about home composting, which would be the preference. We would very much like people to, if they've got the ability and facility to home compost, we would really like to encourage that. We really don't want them to sign up to this service if they can do that. That would be the first point to make. And in supporting that, we're actually providing discounted composting bins if people wish to do that and contact us. We're very happy to help facilitate a discounted composting bin. So this service is for those residents who cannot or do not wish to decompost, who perhaps generate sufficient green waste whereby they need a regular collection service, rather than, again, take the free option of taking their green waste to be recycled so that can be treated in the correct way to the Smugglers Way Recycling Centre. So this is not a charge that's been imposed. It's an optional charge that residents can choose whether they accept or don't accept if they wish to take advantage of the service that's been offered. It's a weekly collection service, so comparison to virtually every other London borough, they offer a fortnightly collection service for green waste. And therefore, in relation to the charge, it is exceptional value because other boroughs will offer a similar charge, but it's a fortnightly collection. So in terms of the frequency, the value that's offered through that is significant. Now, I do appreciate that, that is still a charge for people who have not had to pay to date, but we are, in like every other authority that is introducing this specific service, is charging. It is an extra cost to the council to separate out this green waste to improve the recycling. And we hope the borough, the residents of the borough will see the advantage of doing that with the recycling and the fact that we're not going to be incinerating this green waste going forward, and you know, which is all about, you know, wanting to make this a greener borough. We very much want to encourage residents to green their gardens, but we want also to treat that and recycle that green waste in the right way.
Thank you. Councillor Cowan, I think you wanted to
Yeah,
make a comment.
I should probably put some context into it. The first thing is, this is a new service. There was a service that would take people's rubbish for free, but it was cancelled about 15 years ago. So if you put your garden waste into a black plastic bag and left it open, they wouldn't collect it. They would only collect it if you tied it and disguised it. And that's because it was decreed 15 years ago, before I became the leader of a council, that they wouldn't do green waste anymore. Earlier on, when I first moved into the borough, there used to be a giant skip dropped all over the borough, and you'd see people coming out and throwing things, their green waste, into the skip. But that service was closed down by the Labour administration because it was extremely expensive. The Conservatives, when they were in office, closed down the green waste service. So we haven't had a green waste service since then of any type. And if people put the odd bit of weeding into a black plastic bag and tied the bag, no one would know. But it did always say you shouldn't do that, and you should make your own private arrangements. We wanted to introduce that is, I'm telling you, that's exactly what, if that was actually what was, that was actually the service, you know. So we decided to introduce a new service to give people who like their gardens a green waste service. But the question is then, how do we pay for it? And it's expensive to do any refuse service. And as you've seen with the green and black wheelie bins that have been introduced, they have significantly reduced costs because they will increase recycling. At the moment, we pay to the Western Riverside Waste Authority £165 per tonne, which is about £100 more than you can get it elsewhere in the country. It's a monopoly. We're stuck in it. We have a low opinion of the Western Riverside Waste Authority, but that's how it has been for a very long time. So getting people to do more recycling saves money, and getting people to do green, offering people a new service would give them a new service. All other councils charge for this service. And so the question is, would we do it for free? Well, you live in a borough where children get free breakfast. Now, I'm not a child and I don't have any small children anymore, but I do feel a little bit better to know that children who may be going to food banks would be getting free breakfast. And we've been doing that since 2019. We were the first borough in Britain to do it. And now it's going to be copied by the national government. But that's quite difficult to pay for that. It costs £4 million a year. We're also a borough where we've recognised that there's a lot less police officers on the street, and crime was going up. And we introduced a law enforcement team and a gangs unit. Now, having 72 law enforcement officers patrol the streets of Hammersmith and Fulham is expensive. And we do that for free. We haven't introduced an extra charge for residents. No other council does that in Britain. That's why we have some of the lowest crime in London in comparison to other boroughs. But that's a service that councils aren't statutorily obliged to do. We do free adult social care. So if when we get old, we get dementia or need some other type of care, everywhere else you're assessed. Your house and your assets are looked at, and then you're sent a bill if you require government home care. Say you've been in hospital, you let out, you're then sent a bill, but not in Hammersmith and Fulham, the only place in England where that is included in your council tax payment. And your council tax payment is the third lowest in Britain. So the question is, how do we do that? Well, it's a very good question, because in 2010, our total revenue budget was £184 million. And we've had rampant inflation since. Does anyone know what it is now for this year? Richard, Rosemary, do you know what it is? You'd expect it to go up, wouldn't you, given we've had inflation and 2010 was a long time ago. Well, it's now 124 million, so it's gone down by almost a third. So how do we pay for all these services, give you low council tax, when we've got a third less money? And you once wrote on Next Door, Rosemary, every council has council coffers. Most of the time, the reason I've gone grey is worrying how we pay for stuff. Most of the money we spend, again, is not services I use. The biggest amount of money we spend is on children who are at risk of being abused. And that costs a lot of money to stop them being abused. It's one of the biggest council spends in the council budget. You look at the breakdown of a budget. But once they are being abused, we have to act. And it's precise and difficult work. And that's where most of the council's budget go. It's not in a world that any of us see, thankfully, most of us. But it's that hidden world in that other society that lives side by side with us here in this amazing borough of ours. So when we come to introduce new services, we could subsidize it and make it free, but we'd have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And that would mean maybe not being able to afford the breakfast or less law enforcement officers or other things. And we took the view that we would pay for the other things rather than make this for free. No one else in London does it for free. This is a new service, and that was the decision we took. We fully respect people who love their gardens. I love my garden. It's an expensive hobby, I know. And it certainly is important that we keep the gardens porous. One of the things that Thames Water will do is blame any council if people are flooded out of their homes. But actually, it's Thames Water responsibility to stop flooding, and they haven't invested in their sewer system. So we are actively trying to find hundreds of millions of pounds to change our roads and pavements into porous pavements. If you meet any people in Brackenbury in particular, Brackenbury Road was one of the roads I spent a lot of time in, which has been flooded. AD Road and was another. Once you're flooded, you can't get an insurance. And if you can't get insurance, you can't even sell your house. So we would rather put money into making the porous payments. All the money we raise from Clean Our Neighbours, for example, goes into those types of schemes we're doing around the borough. But it's not easy to balance the council's budget. Within the next 4 years, we'll have to save another 50 million pounds within 4 years. And the new government has said it's inherited a very challenging financial situation and don't expect any more money soon. So how do you do that? I don't know any company that can manage all these services with a third less budget, with rampant inflation, and with all these eclectic challenges. So we think the charge for £90 for green waste is a fair charge. If you don't want it, don't use it. Or go to a private sector option. There are other people who can do this, firms who will happily do it, although they're all a lot more expensive. Or find ways of composting. But this is a new service which we think will help gardeners. And when I've spoken to gardeners about the fact that, would you rather we charge you £90 or cut a little bit of the free school meals or law enforcement, most people say, on balance, I think you've got it right. We'd rather have the law enforcement officers and free school meals for children and all the other things that you do. So that's why the charge is there. It's a good value charge, and it's just part of how we balance books. And in the budget this February, which we're still working on, and we still have about £20 million of savings to find in order to balance books, which we're legally obliged to do by late February 2025. This will be one of the things that in the round we think is the right decision. So I think probably if there is any resident who really can't pay, I'd be open to means testing them if they love the garden but had no money. But, and maybe we'd do something there. But my experience when we've tested this has been that people are quite prepared to pay because they understand the challenges we have, and it's a fair price. Just on the wider issue of the bins, we spent a lot of time getting this right. I think it started in, was it 2019? They started doing the pilots and stuff. We listen to a lot of residents, which is why it's gone so smoothly. And I was always very nervous about it, because asking the public to change how they behave on something as normal as what you do with rubbish or any normal behavior, hopping into your car, how you get around London, how you heat your home. These are quite challenging things to ask people to do, and it can be difficult. People can become angry, and people can also be misled, deliberately so sometimes, because there are often bad actors in the field who will see if they can make politics out of the issue. But on this issue, it's gone extremely smoothly, given it's such a big amount of change. I've had more compliments sent to me on this than any other issue, which is slightly upsetting because we do some quite good things on other fronts. But certainly when we canvassed heavily, and we've just had an election where I spent a lot of time on the doorstep, we got a lot of praise. And the fact is, people can have whatever refuse system they want, the big bins, small bins. Most people aren't as interested in bins as yeah. So they're not. So it has gone extremely well. And I met you, Richard, and we talked about it. And I appreciate you have a lot of anxiety about how the bridge look, but we've had a lot of very good feedback about it from people in Brackenbury, which is why if they didn't want the bins, they could have turned them away by now. And most people are saying to us a variety of things, including, we didn't know it was going to be this easy, or you would listen so much. And as the elected representative there, I have a vested interest in keeping my constituents happy. And that's the feedback we have. I wouldn't be saying if it wasn't true. Most people have said they like the bins, they find them easier. And if they want a smaller one, they can have it. And they sort of know that from the letters that they've had. So I spoke to you about it. We had a long meeting about it when you came to see me.
Trying to phrase the question to acknowledge that the rollout has been good. It's just, could it have been even better? I'm sorry if that aspect of the question didn't come across so well. It wasn't condemnatory. It was just.
I did pick up the tone.
You did something pretty good. Could it have been even better?
I did pick the tone up.
Constructive question.
I did take it as a constructive question.
Good.
But it has. I'm saying the feedback we've had, and I have a vested interest in this. My constituents at the end of the day are my boss. I know we will always listen to people's opinions, even if we disagree with them. But we will try and get a view on what the consensus is. And in the Brackenbury area, which is my own ward, this has been a very successful rollout. And in some cases, people couldn't have bins. I'm sorry about that. Some people asked us for bins, they couldn't have them because their front gardens don't allow. In other cases, people have asked us for larger bins. Some people had signs on the gate saying no bins, and wrote to us and said, could we have one? So, it has gone very, very well. And we think this rollout of the garden waste will do so too.
Councillor Cann, thank you very much. I think that's a very comprehensive answer. So we'll, and we have to move on. So thank you both for coming tonight and for your questions. I think you've got quite the answers to those questions. And thank you very much for coming along. So I think we'll conclude the item there. I think that the recommendation is that obviously we note and have commented on the report. I think there's a lot of praise for the way things have gone, and the rollout seems to have gone fairly smoothly. We obviously have noted some of the bumps in the road, but I think there's a lot of interest in what's going on. I mean, in respect of the garden waste, the rollout of the garden waste service, I think we'd be interested in the advertising and the soft launch that you mentioned, in terms of the way that that's advertised to people, and that they're clear about what sort of that service is actually going to entail. So thank you very much indeed for the presentation. I think you've sort of heard all of the comments that we've got, and we look forward to a further update in due course. Thank you. So moving straight on, hopefully, I think we've got an online presentation on cafe culture, play streets and the street parties initiative from Ian Hawthorne, who is the Assistant Director of Highways, who's going to be presenting remotely. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
I think Ian is with us.
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me okay?
Sorry, let's turn it. Yeah, I think we can just about hear you, Ian.
Turn the mic up a little bit. Otherwise, I'm shouting, and that's never a good thing.
I think we're just about there. Oh,
Yeah, do you want me to try again? Is that good? You tell me when to go and I'll go.
go ahead, Ian.
Okay, great. So I'm presenting this new, it's an initiative that we've created to enhance. It's a very long-winded title. Sorry, Ian Hawthorne, Assistant Director for Highways. It's quite usual for somebody from Highways to be doing this initiative, so I'll put that out front and centre. I'm normally doing engineering things, but this is a different initiative that I've taken on board. It's about civic renewal. It's about promoting increased community activities, and it's with a focus of play streets and community events, but opening out our roads, our streets, to do something different and to encourage people to come together to celebrate Hammersmith and Fulham. So what's driving this? So this initiative is driven by the community and business. They drive this. It's not a Hammersmith initiative in such. It is about asking the community whether they want to do something slightly different on the street, or bringing communities together. And it's how public space is used in a very different way. It's about making it easier, organizer friendly. In the past, I think it seemed to be quite difficult to organise even a street party when there was an event to be done, or to organise a charity event. So we've taken that on board and make an initiative where we bring people together from every area of public life. We try and bring as much support with a wide base, and that's both internally and externally, to make hosting events a bit more practical, a bit more easy. And there's all kinds of different activities that we're helping people to do, from child's play to mobility to public health, charity awareness, or just civic pride in a particular local area. And what type of things are we doing? So I mentioned play streets. It's really simple. We create space in a street, we close it off, we allow children to play, whether that's using space hoppers or badminton, or maybe doing some yoga, or whatever the school and the organisers want to do. We create a space for them to do it. We create spaces for charities, or awareness of dementia and Age UK and all different types of charity. In terms of public health, it's about getting people active with different types of sport, yoga, games, just any activity that will bring people together and to do things. It's also about markets and businesses being part of this process as well. So opening up our streets to do something slightly different, maybe organise a more business event. So similar to the North End Road markets and King Street market days, and the Wandsworth Bridge Residents Spring Fair, exactly the same kind of idea. It's also about celebrating local history, and Hammersmith and Fulham has got a huge amount of history attached to it. So I must admit, when I first joined Hammersmith and Fulham back in 2007 as an officer, I didn't really know Hammersmith and Fulham really well. I loved it so much I'm still here in 2024, so that's how much I appreciate the area. There's a lot that is packed into Hammersmith and Fulham, lots going on, lots happening, lots of rich history and lots of amazing communities. So it is about bringing that all together in terms of this initiative. It's about bringing the football clubs together as well. So I've had talks with Chelsea and Fulham, and I'm still talking to QPR. So those football clubs have an interest in doing this as well. So they want to do more things with us. It's bringing art onto the streets. It's through art exhibitions, music events, even theatre productions, if we can make that happen. So it's doing that as well. And it is a kind of joining up all the current events with the new initiatives. And these are new initiatives sometimes from us, or sometimes from the community, or sometimes it's people who come to us and say, could we do that? And in the past, the answer might have been no. These days is, well, let's see if we can do that. It isn't always easy because public space is difficult. And this is kind of why public space is difficult. So I'm putting my assistant director for highways hat on. That there are mechanics in place to enabling street activities, and they're quite rigid, and they're legal restraints in that. One, you've got to advertise a traffic order to close a road to legally prohibit traffic. You need to think about physical barriers and maybe even some personnel to man those barriers to stop cars coming through into areas that you've created. Engagement and agreement of the local community is really important. So these events have got to be done as part of a community. Now, not everybody will want them, but you've got to have a balanced view about how that looks and feels. Depending what type of event you want, there's all kinds of different forms, whether you want to sell alcohol or you want to do different type of things. So there's that element to it. And the signage you display. So sometimes if it's a fairly significant closure, you're going to want to have alternative routes, so diversion routes. What I've brought together is all the expertise that sits within the council and our consultants and our contractors, and see if we can help residents to do that, to take the pain away from them, and actually take it. It's quite scary if you're faced with that list, and there's a longer list on top of that. If you're going to close the road, quite a scary idea. There's also been a bit of work from me to change the internal dynamics of the council. So I've created a team across the council of enablers from every area, not just highways, not just transport, culture, public health, parks, children's services are really important, have been great, housing, parks, climate change. So it's actually bringing together a group of the willing, and the ethos with this team is to try and see what we can create and help people in the community to deliver. What can we do that's different? How can we help them create that space? How can we make it easier for them to do this once and maybe do it again and maybe do that a third or fourth or fifth time? And how can we help them to that place? It's also about building partnership support. So, as I said before, delivering an event or any activity on street can be really scary. I see our job as the team that we've created is to make it easier, is to use our experts, but both internally and externally, and get their resources. So as cheeky as I am, I went to our contractors and said, oh, look, I want you to do this. I want you to come forward with help us with this program. Lots of social value, lots of putting back into the community. We do lots of work with you, so it's great if you can contribute. So the group that are in the photograph, you can tell the Hammersmith and Fulham employees with the red lanyards. The ones who don't are actually FM Conways, and also there's an FM Conway apprentice there as well. So Conways have been one of the contractors that have assisted us, and there's a whole host of others. Projects Centre, WSP, Mott McDonald's, and Arcadis are also helping us to do this as well. The remit for me is I want payment in kind. I want them to offer us support to be able to allow the community to do things slightly differently, whether that's volunteers from those companies to help out in those days, whether it's expertise in doing traffic orders or maybe designing a layout of a road to be able to enable people to navigate around that particular closure. So all that kind of expertise, the kind of stuff that we do day in, day out, we apply that, and we do that free of charge. So this is about them giving back to us a bit of community social value as part of that. So it's all that knowledge of how we do things, the logistics. We do lots of work around traffic management, so it's about giving that back. And then it's support from the Hammersmith Beard, Chelsea Football Club, Fulham Football Club, some of the businesses as well. So it's a conversation with them to see what they can do to put back into their community. It's one of my favourite ones. It's one of the first play streets we've done. This is Malcolm Primary. I think this is really special. I'm quite old. I'm coming up to 60. I can remember a time when we always used to play out in the streets, and I think this is special. And this is kind of what we're trying to create, creating a small little window in a street to allow children to play safely in a different space, expanding the playground out into the street. That's kind of what we're trying to do. And then it's tying again to education and play together. Now, some of you on this committee would have seen this before. So I did this when I did the contractor presentation. It's really important that we build in STEMs and we go into schools and we talk about engineering and we talk about how important education is. But also this is about fun. So this was something that we did in the classroom. Last month, we took this program and we actually did the same program underneath Hammersmith flyover in the open air. We buried it off, made it safe, and we did exactly the same thing with two schools, St Paul's and St Peter's. And their primary schools helped us build a bridge, and our engineers worked with them to be able to do that. Again, it's taking it into a new angle, putting it out on the street, taking it out of the classroom and putting it out on site, and getting children to be involved with us to be able to do that. There's more work to be done. So I'm bringing this to you at the very beginning. So we started this early part of the new year. We're still working on it. It's still working in motion. We've done 4 play streets, or should I say we've allowed and facilitated 4 play streets, and there's been 9 street parties, one including Dementia Charity and Age UK. We've got 4 more play streets in the pipeline. We've got an art festival that we're talking to communities. We've got a whole series of summer fun events underneath the flyover, and I'll tell you about what's happening there. And all our contractors and consultants will be supporting that. We've got Oktoberfest. We've got several street parties. We've even got a theatre production in Brackenbury, and they're going to do Midsummer's Night Dream, and we're talking to the theatre company to do that and making sure we can facilitate that. And we've taken it into the housing estates, so there's several community events going on in housing estates. I'm working with housing to do that as well. In the report I wrote, there is a kind of what I call a working schedule. So the schedule changes, it moves, new bits are added to it. The thing about bringing people together is that you get amazing ideas, and suddenly things will come out and say, why don't we do that as part of that discussion? That's the beauty of bringing all different types of work areas, people in different, from children's services to highways, all in the same space, all having that same the conversation where we can create something different and special. Fun under the flyover, really excited about this. So underneath the flyover near St Paul's Church, there's a particular bit of highway, which is actually highways land. It's very grey. It's not a very pleasant place, but we're going to change that. We're going to do a whole series of events through the summer. We're supported by Chelsea Football Club. We're supported by our consultants and our contractors. There's going to be DJ workshops. There's going to be beatbox and music production. There's going to be a Black History mural design workshop, mindful classes, poetry, lots of yoga, a silent disco, which was really interesting because I didn't know what a silent disco was. Somebody had to explain to me what a silent disco was when it's just me showing my age. But all kinds of different things. I've given you a little bit of a taster, but the idea is that we do a lot more than that. And obviously Chelsea are going to be doing some activities with us as well. So keep that in mind for underneath the flyover. Look, I've reached out to Fulham and to Chelsea. We're talking about what we can do together. We're talking about how we can impact the neighbourhoods around the club and how they can help us have this conversation around just getting children, people more active and how they can be part of that process. So that discussion is ongoing. And it's an ongoing programme. So here's the challenge. The challenge is that we're trying to make this part of our DNA in the borough. And in some ways that already is. So now we have 85 organisers of street party events in this borough. So every time there's a jubilee or a king's coronation, people will come out and they'll do street parties. So we're trying to harness a bit of that at the moment, and we want to build on success of the King Street and North End Road market days, because those are days where people can come together, can celebrate at a one-off event where people do a lot of great things, and build on the success of some of the community-led bits of work. Around about the Wandsworth Bridge Spring Fair. So again, it's about community coming together, having an event that's special, it's different, it celebrates Hammersmith and Fulham. And I think that's me done.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. A very interesting presentation and interesting to see the wide range of things that are going on. Councillor Lang, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Actually, some of these street parties have taken place quite regularly in the road where I live, but also in the ward where I a councillor. I'm just slightly following up from what you said there. It's very good work. But how are we getting to those other harder to reach groups? Because I feel that it's not across the piece as much as it could be. We made a very good start, but for example, through residents associations, some of these groups that may not be fully aware of the opportunity to do these kind of things, and they need some support sometimes to just get it up and running, because as you say, it's not an easy thing to think about doing without some examples from perhaps good practice that have taken place elsewhere. And I'm just wondering, I'm almost thinking as I speak, sorry, Chair, but whether there are any good examples of some groups out there that are doing this that might be able to talk to other groups about the practicalities of doing some of these street activities, and a sort of named person that people can contact, because you're talking about making it easier. But my question really is, how do we get to some of those other groups that we haven't got to yet?
Okay, so in answer to that question, at the end of this, you can have my email address and anybody can email me and put a proposal to me and give me a request. I like hard challenges, so give me bigger challenge than you could possibly think of, and I will try and make that happen. We're talking about doing a website to promote this, to show best practice, and we've already got really good examples. I've actually put some in the presentation. There are a lot more, so there were more this weekend. So street parties do happen and have happened in the past. What we want to try and do is make that easier. So we've got to think about how we communicate this out. So that can be via the internet and the website, and creating this this page where people can look and feel. We need to adapt some of our street party information around the forms, because they look pretty scary too. And then there's this amazing thing called word of mouth, where if we do this, somebody will tell somebody else, and then somebody else tell somebody else. So there's a bit of that as well. So there's the whole package of communication we really need to do as the next stage of this. I must admit, when we started this, I wasn't sure whether we could pull it off. If somebody said to me, Ian, can you do a theatre production in a road in Brackenbury, I probably would not have thought so, but I'm doing it, and that's where we've encouraged people. We've got the theatre company, and we're going to do it. So it's taken us by surprise. People's goodwill is amazing, and that comes from our consultants, but also our staff as well. So I've got a group of people from all over the council who are working together in this initiative to be able to drive this. So yes, if you've got any ideas for communication, we're all ears. We'll take whatever communication tips you want to give us. We'll do the website. We'll try and do the usual routes of doing this. But my message to this committee is, I'm happy for you to give my email address to anybody who wants to try anything. And I've seen quite a bit in the last 17 years I work for the council. If you want to try something, let's give it a go and see if we can make it happen.
Councillor Cowan, you wanted to add?
Yeah, just to put some context on, I mean, I think, so the idea of this is that we try and activate people's goodwill and good neighbourliness in order to try and create more social cohesiveness. Everyone knows each other. I mean, the word social cohesiveness really describes the fact: do you know your neighbours or not? Do you know people in your neighbourhood? And I was struck when we did shortly after we got into office, we did one of the first street markets where we closed a ward, Hammersmith Grove in my ward, and I met a lady in her early 80s who said what she liked best about this street market. There were people playing music and people selling things and all sorts of. Just for the first time in a long time, she'd lived there for many decades. She knew quite a lot of. She'd met quite a lot of her neighbours. And if we think, you know, Hammersmith, in any city, any big capital city, there is often a high degree of transience, and you can see from the electoral roll that's certainly the case in Hammersmith and Fulham. So the question is, there a social benefit of us making sure that people feel a sense of belonging? And I think there is. So we did a whole range of policies. So we gave tree bases to people so they could plant flowers and maybe get to know the neighbours. I saw that in New York, and we adopted it here. But we then said to people, how about you just put on a street party without a charge? And we make it easier for you to do that. And we are measuring the numbers of increases in street parties has been quite a lot. Or if you want to close the street for the afternoon and all the children can play football, as they did in the street near me recently, it was quite good to see the joy in the kids' faces. And all of a sudden these kids made friends and they'll go to the park next time and play. So that's what we're trying to do. But the challenge is, as we know from residents, working with our residents, is you'll get one residents association run by 2 people, and if they move out, it dies. So what you're trying to do is to try and encourage social entrepreneurialism. We have to look for people in any different community, and we're a very diverse community, many different languages spoken in Hammersmith and Fulham, and let them know that if they want to do something, we will try and help them encourage it. So from that perspective, I would say for all councillors, all 50 of us, you know, if we have an idea we want to do in our ward, then we should encourage it and let Ian know. But there's a whole team there, and we'll try and do something. And it might be a play street, it might be a market, it might be a barbecue. It could be a variety of different things. But there's real value to us, both socially, but also when you look at the cost of isolation and loneliness, and they can be huge in terms of the actual fiscal cost to a society. So I think there's so many benefits of doing it, but I would just say go back to your wards and do it. And if anyone has any other ideas about how to encourage different communities to disengage, then we're totally open, because we're in the vanguard of an experiment. How do you have a cohesive, lots of communities in a very busy city where lots of people are very busy?
Thank you very much. Councillor Borland, did you want to come in?
Actually, just I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation, and it seems wholly positive. And I would encourage people to think both big and small. You know, I don't think everything needs to be a huge, you know, shut down a massive road and you know, bring out the bands and things. Although that's fantastic, it could also just be, as you say, a barbecue or something, you know, much more low key, but it brings people together. So thank you for the work you're doing on it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Collins, did you want to have comments?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks very much for the presentation as well. And it's a great initiative because as a Londoner, you know, born here and growing up, when you watch those things on television where they have a country area somewhere in the countryside and they have something happening on Saturdays or Sundays, you know, you can recognise that you haven't got that in some parts of London. And so I think it's a great initiative. I'm really impressed with it. And the first thing that came to mind was having the LET people on hand, ready for all of these events as well. I had a sense of, you know, that it was quite safe wandering around, and they were quite low key and part of the community. So I think because London is a bit different from the countryside, you might have the village bobby or whatever, but you know, this is London. But I was really, very encouraged by how calm and nice it was at the Wandsworth Bridge Road event. And I think that, there's a huge range of opportunities of different types of thing. And I was quite interested in the theatre idea. There's lots of those groups in our area that would have an opportunity to put on performances or just encourage people into the arts. So thanks very much. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the cross-cutting nature of it brings together some of the themes, obviously, that this PAC looks at, particularly arts and maybe sports as well. Councillor Patel, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just briefly, I would echo back everything that's been said, all the positive things about having a street party. But I think you've got to look at the negative parts as well, as already been said. issuing traffic orders, implementing physical barriers, engaging in agreements with local authority, extra policing, clearance of the site afterwards. I mean, those are things which have to be paid for. I know it's a joint venture between the community and the local businesses. It'd be interesting to know how that's actually paid for and how that works. Can I just mention in particular, the Wandsworth Bridge Road Spring Fair, which I went with 2 other councillors, and we enjoyed it very much. It was a distance of 10 minutes walk from one end of the closure to the other. And although it was nice, it was dominated by various bands playing, people having a good time, all the vendors from the shops selling their produce. But I think it was an opportunity missed. I would like to see more educational stands, perhaps offering different things as opposed to just bands playing music, rock and roll, that sort of thing. And the final thing I would like to say is that within a radius of 10 minutes, we have Ilbrook Common, we have South Park, and we have Parsons Green. Now, events being held there will be cost-free. There's no traffic orders to be issued, no extra barriers, etc. There was an event, for instance, on Sunday, which took place, at which I attended. It was a festival of English wines, and it was very good. It started at 6, it started at 4, finished at 6. By 7 o'clock, you would think it wasn't there. The green was returned in a pristine condition. So perhaps that can be something which can be looked at. It probably hasn't got the same atmosphere as a street party, but nevertheless, it's a question of economics.
Councillor Cam.
It's probably good if I answer that, given that some of these are, are based on the administration's political decisions. So firstly, we are doing stuff in parks, which is why there was a community day in Ravenscourt Park on Sunday. So many of you there, thank you for coming. There was indeed the wine tasting in Ilbrook Common, and there's lots of other activity. Part of the reason that we close roads and have special days is because the high street is struggling and we want to develop community directly in the neighbourhood. And we know 2 things. People will go somewhere straight outside their front door. But secondly, you can support local businesses. So the very first time we closed North End Road, and there was some objection to it. Everyone said you won't be able to do it. TfL will object. It will cost some money. But we had retailers telling us they'd taken a month's taking in a single day. Now, that's not to be sniffed at. You just need to go around the UK and see high street after high street left empty. And we're determined to be the best place, we used to say within the European Union, but now we'll say Europe, for business. And that does mean a very hard stretched retail and hospitality sector. So we know when we do these things and we put on entertainment, we do 2 things. People love it and businesses thrive. And that combination is what makes society work. I would just say, I always loved the American Declaration of Independence, Pursuit of Happiness, which came from an English philosopher, John Locke, who wrote about the pursuit of happiness. And surely in a good society, government can do that. Our political philosophy as social democrats is government can encourage that and should do when it's reasonable to do it and not excessive. So we think we've got the balance right, and we're doing it in a post-pandemic world when businesses are struggling. We're doing it when the internet makes businesses struggle, where business rates are particularly punitive on hospitality and retail businesses. And our message to all those people who are running those businesses, we're on your side, we're going to try and help. So that's why we do it in Wandsworth Bridge Road as well as Ilbrook Common, and why we'll continue to do it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cowan. I think I'll just make one comment and then draw this to a close. I think it's been a very interesting presentation, and I think it shows the huge range of events that are actually going on. I think the benefit of some of the internal dynamics as it's described on one of the slides and the mechanics of enabling the street activities has been that has been growing over several years. So there's more ability to put more events on because we're the teams that has been described know what to do in terms of enabling those events to go ahead. doing those things, which I think if you look back several years, perhaps wasn't as easy, but are making it look more and more seamless. I think that there's obviously the drive to do those events, the quantity and quality of those events should also not be overlooked. I think the event on Saturday went extremely well. We've got a number of events that, you know, the events team, in fact, probably worth praising them here amongst others for putting on these things. And certainly I would also, you know, thank Mr. Hawthorne and all of the others who are working on this, because the ability to be able to put these closures in place and to put these events on is absolutely not to be sniffed at. And the fact that we've got a good way of enabling that to happen is all to the good, and I think is hopefully producing the benefits in terms of social cohesiveness, but also the fact that we've got these, you know, the ability to put these events on, you know, regularly, and to have the wherewithal to do that is, you know, testament to, you know, the decisions that have been taken politically, but also, you know, more broadly the sort of infrastructure to actually be able to do that. So I think we look forward to continuing this and maybe getting to more of those hard to reach groups as necessary, and you know, being able to put on further events in the future. So thank you for bringing this. We'll be interested to see how this sort of continues to work over the months and years ahead. So thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Hawes.
Thank you.
If you're still with us. So I think, where are we? Moving straight on, last but certainly very much not least, is the item number 6, which is the update on the sport and physical activity strategy, which we have discussed once or twice before. Sorry.
I will leave on that case now. So thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you very much. So Simon Ignon, thank you for waiting with us patiently for this, but we look forward to talking about the update on the sports strategy.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name's Simon Ignon. I'm the Assistant Director for Parks and Leisure, and have the pleasure this evening of bringing back to you an update on the sport and physical activity strategy following some recent public consultation. I'll just wait for the slides to come up. Thanks, Rob. As you've all been sat down for 2 hours, if you want to take this opportunity while we load the presentation to stretch, then feel free to do so. My activity watch suggested I've been sat for too long, so it is indeed, Rob. Yeah, bright orange one. There we go. Thank you very much, and you can jump to the second slide as well. Okay. Thanks very much, Rob. It is that one. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So just bringing back the report for the second time to this committee, following the last presentation and comments received from councillors, we made a few minor changes to the key themes, and the next steps were to consult with residents on the strategy's vision, mission, key themes, and also public satisfaction with sport and leisure facilities in the borough, and potential improvements to contribute to the strategy's action plan going forward. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, just wanted to run through what we brought back to you last time. So the vision is to become the most active borough in the UK, and this will be achieved by providing targeted interventions for the least active and the most deprived communities to improve health, well-being and community cohesion across the borough. Our mission is to promote, support and make sport accessible to all within the borough, and we'll do this through 5 strategic themes, which were promoting accessible physical activity for those less active in the community, opportunities for every child to have a positive experience of sport, maintaining activity levels, supporting community grassroots sports to provide activities for everybody in the community, and improving the environment of physical activity and sports opportunities within the borough. As I mentioned, we use the council's Have Your Say website to seek views and opinions from the sporting and wider community on these 5 themes, and also on the satisfaction with sport and physical activity in the community. We promoted the survey in late spring, and the results were brought to us back in mid-June, and I'm bringing those to you this evening. Next slide, please, Rob. So in terms of participation in the consultation feedback on the council's website, which was promoted through e-news and social media with our communications team, 180 visitors visited the website portal, and we had 21 completed questionnaires. Overall satisfaction was that 81% rated sports and leisure provision as fair to good within the borough. And we gained many insights into the strategic themes and also opportunities for improving sport and physical activity in the borough. With regards to the 5 proposed strategic themes, the most support was for priority themes 1, 4 and 5. And a couple of respondents suggested other themes which generally fit within one of our 5 theme areas. Priority or theme 3, which is about maintaining participation, whilst important, because we obviously need to keep everybody who's active currently continue to be active, it was seen as less aspirational than the other remaining 4 themes. In terms of some of the opportunities for people that suggested which could help people to be more active, there were more regular, open, free, accessible activities in parks and open spaces, opportunities to ensure people can walk easily around the borough, and led walks or walking routes, more green spaces with separate and clearly marked cycle lanes, and more opportunities for swimming and tennis activities as well. Some of the areas that people felt were barriers to why people didn't participate as much as they did was cost, which generally comes out, available facilities and opportunities on the doorstep, and better information. And then we looked at several specific facility improvements that people mentioned, which is around activities on Shepherd Bush Green, which is currently a wide open green space, but with no formal activities. Linford Christie Stadium, reports about needing upgrading, and we have plans already that we'll make sure that the respondents to the questionnaire will be aware of, and we hopefully have some good news about opportunities and contracts being let imminently to improve Linford Christie Stadium. Improvements to Lily Road recreation sports facilities. Opportunities for more swimming in the borough, with only 2 pools that people have access to at Fulham Pools and the Phoenix Centre. Improvements to the artificial grass pitches, which are heavily overbooked by schools and also community sports groups, and free park outdoor gyms, having just opened one recently in Hammersmith gym, but making sure that those others in parks, open spaces are fit for purpose going forward. Next slide, please. Is it just loading, Rob? Okay. Great, thank you very much. Obviously, as part of helping to co-produce this strategy, as is the council's policy, we specifically sought consultation feedback about how accessible facilities are for our residents with disabilities. And the key 3 things that came back was we need to improve facilities for people with disabilities, improve opportunities for activities, and ensure that those facilities and opportunities are then better communicated with residents with disabilities and their carers. And then finally, in the open question, at the end of the questionnaire, a couple of other activities came out that people suggested, which was free climbing walls, an outdoor swimming pool or Lido, make free activities for children in local parks, and supporting more competitive programs for those clubs in the borough, like our swimming club. And then specifically, in response to providing activities for disabled people, provide something a disabled teenager can do without having to drive miles. Whilst the response rate on our consultation was a little bit lower than we would have liked, there have been a number of other consultations in the borough that we'll take part of and include within our strategy development. You may remember Beat the Streets was a very successful programme in February, March and April this year, run by Climate Change and our public health colleagues. Over 13,000 people signed up to that activity, kind of urban orienteering programme. And they had a very comprehensive exit interview, which provided a lot of feedback to people's participation rates before, afterwards, and what would help them continue to participate. And we're working closely with public health colleagues to balance that feedback into our strategy action plan and link also with the health and wellbeing strategy. We've also undertaken some consultation called Play Zones, which is about upgrading multi-use games areas or ball courts, basketball courts, both on housing estates and our parks and open spaces. This is particularly focused on what young people want, and we've had over 500 responses to that consultation as to where their needs are within the borough and where we can improve access to those. And that information is going to be very helpful to us, particularly in targeting some of the harder to reach groups and ensuring that our ball courts, which have traditionally really only provided for male sports, predominantly of basketball, football, is how we can make those more accessible. And there's some recent research on how we can make parks and open spaces more active for women and girls to participate in safely and in an environment that is conducive and encourages them to be active. And we'll be looking for 1 or 2 exemplars of that, hopefully in our action plan and delivery going forward. Next slide, please. And then the final element is that Greenwich Leisure Limited, or Better, is the operator of our 3 leisure facilities in the borough. They do an annual user survey that's just completing as well at the moment, and we'll be feeding that information into our consultation as well. They have over 5,000 live members on their gym and swim programs, another 900 people on the swimming program, and a further 1,000 members who are borough leisure card holders, which provides discount of up to 30 or 50% on activities for those struggling with the cost of living. They can sign up for that card as well. So we'll hopefully have a very well-rounded kind of consultation that's feeding into our strategy going forward. Next slide, please, Rob. Finally, at the last presentation, the committee obviously wanted to make sure that this strategy was co-produced, and some of the work that officers have been doing has been collaborating with disability sports organisations, active in the borough, engaging with athletes with disabilities, and working with other stakeholders to design, implement and evaluate our existing sports programmes, and then feeding into our action plan under the 5 themes for our new strategy going forward. Officers have been working through a framework which demonstrates what has been done and what will be done to ensure that the strategy is successfully co-produced. That's around building relationships and trust and mutual respect with our sports organisations in the borough, such as Action on Disability, MenCap, Dance West, and other key stakeholders. It's about inclusive planning when we are designing new sports facilities with people with disabilities to ensure they are fully accessible. It's about training and development with our sports coaches, staff, and volunteers to ensure that they are aware of how they can adapt their sports and activities to make sure that they are inclusive for everybody and develop good leadership programs in our schools and our colleges, and ensuring that we get positive and constructive evaluation and feedback that we listen to and then put back in when we are designing future opportunities and programs. Next slide, please, Rob. And then finally, the next steps in bringing this back to you and finally having a concluded new sport and physical activity strategy is we're compiling all these consultation results that I've mentioned. We are confirming with our strategic plan holders and Action on Disability and our other co-production colleagues, the final themes and the action plans. And we'll be bringing that back to yourselves and the Cabinet member for approval early in the new year before publication of the strategy in March. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. And thank you for bringing this. Yeah. And also I think the report has got a lot of additional colour in it, some of which you've covered, obviously in the presentation. Councillor Borland.
Thanks for that. Apologies, because I'm aware it's not your fault. Obviously, you said that it was advertised on social media and things, everything. But are we seriously saying that with the backbone of the strategy is going to be based off 21 people's responses? It feels like that's not it. I don't know if we can go back out and rerun it, or why do you think there was such a low response rate on the consultation?
It's a very good question. In terms of, we wouldn't be just doing it on the 21 responsive. I've explained 3 other areas that we've got a far bigger return, which gives us a huge insight into people's perceptions and thoughts about sport and physical activity in the borough. And I think that gives us well over 1,000 responses across those other consultations that have been run, with over 13,000 people signing up to Beat the Streets. But I don't have the figures that responded, but I know it was a very good response. There's over 8,000 through GLL's research, and we've had 500 young people. So I think that gives us a better and well-rounded consultation. It is disappointed. Maybe it was the time of year it went out. Maybe it was the football. Maybe we could have done more publicity. We did write out to our key stakeholders and organisations in the borough and ask them to send it out to their members. It was out for five to 6 weeks live, from the end of April to the beginning of June. I guess it covered 2 bank holidays and a half term as well, but it followed normal consultation rules and regulations. So I don't want to delay the strategy any longer, because I'm conscious we've probably taken a little bit too long to bring it to where we are, but that's why we are using other research that we feel will help us give a rounded strategy.
Thanks. I think that it's lucky that we have those other bits of research, and just disappointing because obviously it's, if you read the consultation feedback is kind of, because it could be so skewed with just 21, all it takes is for 3 of those people to be within the same group and all caring about Shepherd's Bush Green, say, and the whole thing is kind of completely off kilter. But outside of that, I think that we do have some great facilities in the borough, and all it takes is for you to be outside and you see everyone taking part in something. There's a lot going on. All of it. I've met with you before with other residents about pressures on our green spaces and trying to maximize the all year use of those, and balancing out the kind of the paid aspects versus just the kind of community being able to just go out and have a kickabout rather than things. So thank you for the work you're doing on that, and be interested to see how you get on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see actually the strength of the co-production in your document, and I remember the Chair raised that point when we last met, so that's good to hear. We are in the great summer of sport, or somebody told me that. We've got the Olympics coming up, haven't we? We've done all right in women's football, but men's football, we got to the final. But I just think there's an opportunity to draw on some of that. And I hear what you said about we've got to get the strategy right. One group that I've been very impressed with is the Youth Council. They spoke at our last full council meeting, and I went to when they were elected. They might be a group that you could approach. They've got some good access, because I think, as we said last time, while we want this to be an inclusive strategy for everybody, I'm particularly concerned that we recognise the needs of young people who have been badly affected by the pandemic and still. So can we try and build some sort of legacy for that? The other thing is, I just want to pick up, I thought that bit about play zones was, for me, resonated with me, because going around quite a bit canvassing over the last few weeks and months, I've seen some areas which look to, so there could be opportunities if the community was engaged, and that's to come later on, obviously, but I'm pleased that you've said that. And I think the timetable that you've got seems to be able to work. Will you be bringing a final strategy to us before, so in January, February time, will you, that meeting?
Yeah, I think your next cycle's November, and then the one after that is end of January, beginning of February. I didn't have the exact date, but okay, yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, and then it gets public. So anyway, so yeah, thank you very much. I mean, for me, sport is very important at a high level, and we've got some elite sports practitioners here in Hammersmith and Fulham, but it's also at a very much grassroots level for everybody. You know, I still, until very recently, played five-a-side football, and you know, those sorts of things, those facilities for everybody are very important. But I just echo, I'm pleased to see the co-production really there, central to the plan. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to come back on 2 points. That young Hammersmith and Fulham were involved in the consultation on play zones. So training up young people, or relatively young people, to then interview young people about the facilities that they use and where they would use more if the investment was there around the play zones. If there are other examples that you've spotted as you've gone around the borough, please feel free to share them, you know, through my email address, and happily follow up on those opportunities as well. But thank you very much for that suggestion.
Councillor Collins, do you want to come in?
I just wanted to say, yeah, it sounds really interesting. And I was just wondering, what are some of the barriers that you've identified in your research for women getting more involved, and for some of the facilities being underused, particularly the playgrounds? I just wondered if you had a view on that as well.
Yeah, it's a challenging subject and an area, but I think, you know, safety forms a part of that, and obviously we have a very effective law enforcement team who are very present, you know. But I think, as has been listened to today, that where they are in association with play streets, where we've done those activities and they're present, I think it's ensuring that there are opportunities where there are then leaders or volunteers or community champions. We've seen that with the outdoor gym we just put in Hammersmith Park, that where we provide kind of an instructor and advertise community sessions, then more people will turn up to those activities. So I think it's, you know, it's not always about unpaid employment, although we obviously do encourage and we train up people to become sports leaders and personal trainers. But then it's also about looking for people to give back to their community, which, as we've seen from the play streets, that people are prepared to do that and organise things. And, you know, many of the sports opportunities in the borough are run by a wonderful volunteer network, which, you know, we can't do everything on our own, and therefore we need to support, you know, and encourage them to do even more. So I think it's taking on board some of the research that's happened, making sure spaces are well open, there's good sight lines, that there are volunteers and people around. And that's why we often put our outdoor gyms in prominent places. So although some people may have some image issues, actually people aren't watching them when they're there, but actually people feel safe when they're in the middle of pathways and others, so they know if somebody is always walking around, rather than tucking things around the back of parks and open spaces where they're less prominent, and then people may feel more at risk or vulnerable.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was on with that issue as well, where I thought that some of the parks, they've got these huge bushes that they're growing around, and you just walk past them and they, you know, they're never used, but they could, you know, I wouldn't use them even as a shortcut, and there's nothing happening there. I've never heard of anything happen there, but it's the perception. And I think that there's quite a lot of those locations, even a wrongly placed sort of hut or shed, you know, can cause an issue, and a lower uptake of women, I think, definitely. But yeah, I'll be watching, and it sounds very encouraging. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Patel, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just quickly, I think the consultation's taken us forward, but as you said, further work requires to be done. I note that the responses, only 22% were from age groups 19 to 34, and only 11% from Black British, which I think doesn't really actually cater for the diversity of this borough. I think in particular, when it comes to sporting events, I think we need to concentrate on some groups where, due to their religious and traditional values, they cannot participate in sports like other groups can. So I think there needs to be a wider consultation, and I'm glad that, in addition to what we've already done on social media, you will actually further the research before the final strategy. Thank you.
Sorry, do you want to comment on that? No, okay, fine. So thank you very much for the report. I just wonder, as part of this, whether there are, given the fact that there's a lot of work for you to do here. There's clearly some facilities as well that people have identified that might need some upgrading and everything else, which I think it just feels like a big chunk of work to do, I guess, which has got to be sort of broken down so we can get. I mean, I just wondered whether there are any quick wins that can happen between now and next March. I know that one of the things that we're probably aiming at is not that people sort of decide that they want to go down to their local pool and jump in it, or that they sort of get the kit on and start running around the park. Although I think our park's very well used for that sort of thing. But I guess the top priority is getting people more physically active, and whether we can. I think your sort of suggestions about sort of led sessions on how to use the equipment at the outdoor gyms, or just encouraging people. I mean, there must be some ways of encouraging people in a more sort of benign way to become more physically active, which doesn't necessarily have to involve, doing press ups and lifting weights or anything like this. But are there other things between? I mean, I'm wondering. I think you're probably looking at it in terms of supporting and encouraging some of the voluntary networks that go on, and I guess so. Are there some of those things that we can do in the near future? Perhaps advertise a little bit more, and also measure a bit of. I mean, as best possible, measure how that's going, because clearly, to some extent, we really want to get those people out who are not doing any activity or doing a low amount of activity to get to a bit more activity. And we don't want to put them off by saying that you have to be sort of, doing very, physical sports from a sort of low base. We want them to be sort of, these are beautiful parks, so this is a way of becoming more active, I guess.
Yeah, no, certainly. We do have a range of sports development programs already. Active Minds is something that you may have seen advertised, which has been successful, which we started in January. So we're not standing still waiting for the strategy to be done. There are ongoing programs and activities. I think you hit the key on the head. It's getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And that's where I think working with our public health colleagues more closely, which we will do on the back of Beat the Streets, and working through the health and wellbeing strategy, that the ones we really want to target, as you say, are the 20-30% in the borough that don't do any activity at the moment, and just to get them out and more active than they currently are already, without having to take part in a sport per se, but just to be active travel or active movement, go and have some fresh air for half an hour, find their local park, and it's a signposting around activities. And then if they want to take the next step, that's even better. And we're trying to link with GP referral schemes, health workers and others that are identifying people that are at risk if they aren't undertaking activity at the moment, and then linking up and kind of doing almost one-to-one with them through the health worker network to identify what are their motivations, what things might make them happier or better, and then trying to signpost them and link them to particular activities. And again, we can also do that with a targeted approach with residents with disabilities, as well as to trying to signpost those to ensure that they are more active as well. A good example is we just worked with a group of Somalian women to find them an additional hour at Fulham Pools. So there is a women-only session now at Fulham Pools that's starting in the next month, in response to communities that have come to us. We already had one at the Phoenix Janet Ajigogo swimming pool in the north of the borough. We're now introducing that at Fulham Pools, and working with the operators there and other clubs that are being shifted around to make that accessible for that targeted group as well. So
that sounds great, actually. I mean, I think if we can move, so I'd be interested in outside this meeting talking about it as well. But if we can push and advertise some of those, get that information into the right place, and encourage people potentially also through voluntary sports groups, but also through the community as well. Because I think the Beat the Streets thing worked quite well, as I understand it, with groups that weren't necessarily obviously sports groups, but might have been sort of. I know that sort of the Catholic Church in White City, for example, was quite involved in that, which may have then dragged more people who potentially weren't that active into exploring the beauty of their their environment, really. So I'd be very interested in the sort of things that you can do, even now, between now and then, and maybe that we need to advertise it better and also get it into some of the community groups that are out there, because they're probably quite a good hub for some of the getting that information out and actually hosting some of that activity and pointing people in the right way. I think also, I mean, on a sort of grander scale, obviously, as Councillor Lang has said, you know, we've got a fantastic summer of sports, and I guess people hopefully be inspired to either take up activity or take up more activity through the particularly, you know, watching the Olympics in the next couple of weeks, and we do obviously have some of those sports clubs that are available. I don't know to what extent they want lots of new members, but of course there are. You know, we do have particularly with the river, we have some rowing that goes on as well, and certainly young people in some of our schools I know are involved in that. But whether we can just broaden out, I think this is more about enabling as well, clearly, rather than you and colleagues providing this stuff. But he's really pointing people in the right direction. I guess you're doing quite a lot of that already, but whether we can redouble the efforts once people have been inspired by seeing sport in action to at least get themselves out and active, I guess.
No, we can certainly come up with a comms campaign on the back of the Olympics and other activities. Obviously, you always see a bit of an increase in tennis after Wimbledon. We've also got the test match going on currently at the moment, and there's more cricket going on. And then obviously you've got, as you say, the highlight with the Olympics, with almost, an A to Z of different sports. And there are opportunities for most Olympic sports, in the borough for people to be signposted to. There is an A to Z of sports on our sports website at the moment as part of the council's website. We just need to make sure with comms that we signpost people to those opportunities.
No, that's right. I mean, I suppose there's also the opportunity to make some sort of some of those short videos that we put on the council website seem to, if we can get those, get a bit of greater reach on those, maybe that might inspire a few people to do that stuff. I mean, we do sometimes make some what I think are very excellent informative videos, but I guess we can publicise those via social media as well, to give people an idea of the range of either activities they can take part in, or the physical activity that they can do for themselves, even if that's even if it's just getting out and doing 5,000 steps of walking when they're only doing 2,000 every day. But no, thank you very much for bringing this back. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, one other thing we're looking at is we have our biannual sports awards in September. So we are writing out to all our sports clubs at the moment to look for nominees for about 9 or 10 different awards that we give out every 2 years. And that's another opportunity to promote both the volunteers, the coaches, and the sports clubs across the borough. So that's going to be held, I think, in the last week of September, and promotion and advertising is going out at the moment, and we'll continue to do so through the summer for those nominations. So.
No, thank you very much. We should probably try and make more of that. I think I was invited to it a couple of years ago, but it'd be interesting to see that. No, so I think we very much look forward to the further development of this strategy. As I say, if there are some quick wins, or even less quick wins that could happen between now and then, that would sort of give some of what's going to be the strategy a bit of a jump start, that would be good to build on some of that. Just interested to see how that will develop over time, and how we'll sort of measure the sort of physical activity that people are taking part in. I'm very encouraged by obviously the work around co-production. That's vital in terms of the missions that we've got as part of the council at the moment. And really just trying to push people into more physical activity as well as into sports, and signposting them in the right direction would be great as well. So thanks for all the work that's taking place on this, and we look forward to seeing some more fruits of your labours in due course. So thank you very much for all of the presenters tonight, for participating or watching the meeting tonight, and for those who are coming back next time, the next meeting will be on the 18th of November. So enjoy the summer until we meet again. Thank you.